Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Hey, Alex Simmons, how are you? Sorry there's no backdrop, but Glorious and I have
You out all
headed
your
south.
books?
We
You
are,
headed south?
no, yeah, I'm in the witness protection. We're down in the Jersey Shore, but we had to take a little break because we have a chance to talk with James Aquilone today, and we're really excited. James, if you give us a second, I'm going to say hello and ask Alex how he's doing. No one cares.
Who cares
No one
about
really
me?
cares.
Yeah,
Alex, how are you?
what? Huh? Who? Yeah, I am fine. James, welcome. Welcome to the House of Madness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
James, we're thrilled to talk to you. A winner, Bram Stoker Award winner, 2 Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards, an Imogen Award, and all of this is just fairly recent in the last couple of years as you've exploded from managing editor at Weird Tales, which is still the day identity, right? And then you have a couple of amazing anthologies we want to talk. We want to talk about your own character, Dead Jack. We want to talk about a certain new license that you now have. And one of the key ways that has helped you do all this, if everyone sticks around towards the end, we're going to talk about Kickstarter and maybe
how to make it work. Yes.
Yeah, maybe you'll tell us a few keys on how to make that work for us.
Because he did. The man did. Okay.
That pretty impressively.
But now.
So James, let's start with you are a managing editor at Weird Tales, and you helped create the beautiful 100 Years of Weird. What a fantastic collection. It does honor to the title of the magazine, the history of the magazine, and it was thrilling to read, to look at. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with Weird Tales and that collection in particular?
And please start out by saying what Weird Tales is, because we probably have some folks who don't know it.
Right.
1 or 2.
Weird Tales was one of the original pulp magazines going back to, I think, 1923, right? Because that's why we did the 100th anniversary. And this is, I guess it was rebooted like 1988, I think. And so it's been continuing on from like 1988 to now. And Jonathan Mayberry took it over. I think it was 2016. And we've really been growing since we've had Jonathan at the helm. We were just maybe putting out like maybe 1 issue a year for a long time. And now we have a deal with Blackstone Publishing and putting out like 3 issues a year. And I actually have we also have if you've seen this, the Occult Detective issue too.
Yeah. We have some people we know in that issue. Yeah.
I'm in there. So then Jonathan asked me to be in the 100th anniversary anthology, and that's the first book, I think, under the deal with Blackstone. So Weird Tales is also now getting into book publishing, where they have their own imprint, where they'll be doing Weird Tales Presents novels.
Oh, great! That's
Jonathan just had the first one came out, Jonathan's Necrotech book earlier this year, but the 100th anniversary anthology, that was the first book, but I think they're mostly going to be focusing after that on novels.
What's the genre? What's the genre it focuses on?
It's mostly horror, but they veer into, because I think Jonathan's Necrotech is also a little sci-fi, but there's a lot of horror in it too.
Yeah.
I think they also have 2 books coming out from Kevin J. Anderson, and those are maybe skew a little bit more to sci-fi. Weird Tales,
I would say that
a lot of different genres.
Yeah, it tends to be more haunting, suspense, chills than, say, splatter or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's more of the traditional 100 years of history of it. Yeah. Also, you're doing some audio book versions of the magazine. Those have been really fascinating to listen to.
Well, Blackstone's the big audio book company. I mean, I think they started out as audiobook, but then they started publishing also print books too. So their focus is the audiobook. So every issue of Weird Tales is now getting a really nice audiobook version as well.
Yeah, and it's a fresh experience of a fine tradition. I've read pulps most of my life, but listening is really great. And you're continuing on as managing editor there, yes? That's
get rid of
a,
it.
it
Yeah.
just seems like a really cool place to work,
I
to be
work
involved with that.
cheap, so they keep me
There you
on.
go. That's the key, ladies and gentlemen.
They give him more issues, right?
Now, while all that's going on, you have your own character, Dead Jack. Now, I'm not sure if James, but Alex has a character, Blackjack, and
Okay.
never the twain shall meet, because Blackjack's from the 1930s. Dead Jack, can you tell us a little bit about? I know you have at least 3 novels, yes, and some short stories and stuff that have appeared in places. Can you tell us a little bit about Dead Jack?
Well, the first Dead Jack short story appeared in Weird Tales, like
There you
back in
go.
2014. That was my first acceptance, short story acceptance. That was back when Marvin Kaye was the editor.
Mhm.
Dead Jack is a zombie detective. He was addicted to fairy dust, and it's pretty wild books. But Dead Jack does come from the 1930s and 1940s.
Oh,
Yeah, so he was in World War II, and the whole story is that the Nazis are gathering up all these kind of occult creatures and stuff to win the war. And then somehow everybody gets zapped into this other dimension called Pandemonium. And so Jack, he was turned into a zombie during World War II, but then he's along with all of the mythical creatures and monsters of this world are now trapped in Pandemonium.
Wow.
So the world that they function within is not this world, it's that world. It's
right.
another. Ah,
Yeah. So it's like a 1940s New York, but like in hell. But and
That's
everybody
fascinating.
in it in the world is
And anything that was a myth or legend can show up.
right.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. And he solves cases.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a lot of fun. And you have, if I remember correctly, 3 novels out with Dead Jack.
It's 3 novels, and I think we have about 6 short stories now.
All right. Just for those who are jumping on Amazon to scoop them up, what are the titles they should look for?
The novels are there's Dead Jack and the Pandemonium Device, Dead Jack and the Soul Catcher, and Dead Jack and the Old Gods. And
There you
some
go.
of the
oh,
books
that's
have the short stories in the back. But one of these
Cool.
days, I'm going to gather up all the short stories and put out a Dead Jack short story collection.
Excellent. Speaking of collections, one of the things that started furthering your legend were a couple of collections with the word unleashed in the title. The first was Classic Monsters Unleashed, fresh take or different take on the classic monsters. You want to fill in of some gaps there. What didn't I say about this collection?
Yeah, that was my first big Kickstarter in 2021. Yeah, and it was new stories based on Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, all of the great classic monsters. And yeah, we had Jonathan Mayberry in there and Joe Lansdale and F. Paul Wilson was in there. We had a lot of big names.
You had a lot of heavy hitters in there.
Yeah, so it was when I was pitching that to everybody was down for that. Everybody loves the classic monsters,
Sure.
and everyone wanted to be in the book. And then it was a Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter just blew up. We did,
Right.
we did extremely well.
So I have 2 questions for you to follow that up.
Yeah,
You pitched the bigger names first before going on Kickstarter, is that correct?
yeah. I went to
So
Jonathan first.
so did your experience on Weird Tales help?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
that
mean,
because you had some great names. And one of the questions I was back when I was pitching it was how did he get so many wonderful toys? So I would imagine that would help a little bit, but then playing with these characters, that
yeah.
probably helped as well.
Yeah.
And the Kickstarter part, how much did you ask as your goal, and then how much did you make?
I think the goal was like 5,000 or 10,000, and we ended up making 57,000.
Now, were you shocked? Did you talk? Let's talk about that experience, because if I remember correctly, this is the first time you're really pushing Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, I did a Kickstarter. My first Kickstarter was for my first Dead Jack novel back in 2016, and it did well. I didn't need to raise that much money because it was a novel, and I just had maybe 2 illustrations in there. It wasn't that big a thing that I needed all the money, but I raised over $5,000, and that really
Wow.
surprised me at that time. And I thought that was huge. I didn't have any audience or anything. No one knew who I was. So I was definitely a little apprehensive about even doing a Kickstarter. And my goal for that, I wanted to ask for only $500 because I
Right.
didn't think I'd even get that. And then someone at Kickstarter said to me, you should do a goal of about 1,000 because it looks like it's more serious. Because
Okay.
if you only went with $500, it doesn't look like you're serious. So I was a little scared to even do 1,000 because it's like I hadn't done anything. This was my first novel. I didn't have any readers or fans or anything like that. So I was like, that seemed like it would be difficult to get $1,000, but I ended up getting the $1,000 in the first 3 days, and it did pretty well. So I was shocked. So I ended up not even doing another Kickstarter until Classic Monsters until 2001 because there was a whole other bunch of stuff that was going on after, because Dead Jack, that Kickstarter did well, and then the Dead Jack novel did well. I got an agent. The Dead Jack got optioned for TV and movies.
Wow.
But it actually derailed things, and then it was a whole other kind of craziness that went with that, as my agent then wanted to take my book from being self-published to try to get a deal with a publisher. We ended up actually getting a deal, but with a small company that doesn't exist anymore, and they ended up having to get my rights back. So that kind of derailed the series, because my original intention with Dead Jack was to put out a Kickstarter like maybe every 6 months or so, and they were going to be short novels, and I wanted to build up on that. But then when I got the agent, he doesn't want it to be self-published. He wants to get a book deal. So we waited. We worked on that for a year trying to get a deal. I had to unpublish the book, even though it was selling well.
Sound
So
familiar?
Yeah.
so
It's
getting
a
the agent
nightmare. It's a nightmare.
it was, because getting the agent was actually one of the worst things that could have happened to me. And so really from between 2016 and 2021, nothing was really going on because things were going on behind the scenes, but not really. So I had the TV movie deal. The producers asked me to write a TV pilot for it. That was another crazy process that was going on for about 2-3 years.
I'm with you there. I'm with
Oh yeah, I rewrote it like 20 times, and
Yeah.
it was getting a lot of conflicting notes.
Oh yeah.
It would be like, we want it to be like this, and then I would do it like that, and they go, oh no, we want it to be like that, and then in the end they accepted the original script that I wrote.
Oh man.
So it's like every crazy Hollywood story
Oh yeah.
that you think of. So I lost 5 years, but I also
learned a hell of a lot.
I learned, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Are you still agented?
Can I just do a thing here?
Sure.
Not that agent.
Literally, yeah. Merrick, they're looking for the body. No, you started to say something when Chris asked you about getting all these people on board for the anthology. You started to say something about that, and then we got caught in this one. So what were you gonna share there?
I wanted to do an anthology for years, but I didn't think it would be that easy. And I know for the anthologies to do well, you have to have big names in it. And so again, I didn't know anybody, and I didn't think anyone would say yes to me editing an anthology. So I was working with Weird Tales, and so I wanted to wait and make contacts through Weird Tales. So I was editing a lot of their stories. I had edited stories by Ramsey Campbell and Joe Lansdale and Tim Wagner. And so I figured after doing that for a couple of years, it would be a little bit easier now, because at least they know who I am. And then I had a good relationship with Jonathan. So I just asked Jonathan first. So I said, if Jonathan
okay?
Yes, to the project, then it'll be okay. So I asked Jonathan, and he said yes right away. And then I said, all right, let me go to the next guy. And so I said, oh, Jonathan Mayberry is interested in this.
There you go. You only need the one.
You can't say no. But then I went to the next person and the next person, and then
validation.
Yeah. So it was actually pretty easy. And yeah, everyone was really excited about the concept.
And to remind everybody, that was classic Monsters Unleashed. And I have to say, it's cover to cover fun. And part of it is you had a great collection of authors, but there were some open spots that were filled by up and coming, shall we say. And great fun all along. And
I
then
just want to put a point in there, because you said that, James, and it's very important. You said you didn't know it was going to be that easy, but I also, just for our listeners, want to point out that it was time. that you took
Yeah.
time to not only establish yourself and the credibility of your skill set, but also to establish relationships. And then when you were ready to make your move, you
Then it
went
was
to the person you had the strongest relationship with first.
Right.
And then that began to work almost as in some ways like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically putting in 8 years of work because being the managing editor for Weird Tales, but also doing stuff like, if you remember, there was a blog called SF Signal.
It's easy for you to say.
SF Signal. They won a couple of Hugos at the time, but I was working with them, and there was a feature they used to do called the Mind Meld, where you would ask a question and then you would get a bunch of authors to answer it. So that was a really great way also to get contacts. So I think that's how I first met with Lisa Morton. She had done it a few times. So just like trying to network over like almost a decade before I tried to do classic monsters. Yeah, it was easy. I put in 10 years of networking.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
It was a 10-year overnight sensation.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And the lesson shouldn't be ignored that serving as a managing editor or someone who is working with their stuff established you. So then when it was your turn, they knew you. It's far easier to do that than a cold call. From there, we went to Shakespeare Unleashed, and I was amazed that was the next choice. Shakespeare definitely has a bit of a following.
Yeah, Bill
a definite different challenge than the classic monsters. And yet, another fun book. Can you talk to us about who did you approach? How did this concept come up? How did it develop?
We were really successful with Classic Monsters Unleashed. Let's do a series. So then it was, what's the next thing to do? And I wanted to keep going into different worlds and not. Everyone expected me to do another Classic Monsters type thing. Maybe I should have done another, and I will do that eventually, because that's what I'd like to do, is just do a Classic Monsters series, and then it'll be different themes based on the Classic Monsters. But I was always a fan of Shakespeare, and I always loved that movie, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead.
Sure.
That was amazing, the way Tom Stoppard, who wrote the play and wrote the movie, integrated the play with these minor characters. So I just, since I was a kid, that was always on my mind, so that because that blew my mind. You can play around with Shakespeare's characters. I did do that. It really aligned well then with the Classic Monsters, and seemed different enough that it would be pretty cool. And I forget who I contacted first. Probably Jonathan again. Jonathan, so you want to do this? But at that point, it was a lot easier because Classic Monsters was so successful, and so many people were trying to get into Classic Monsters Unleashed. That's another thing I didn't realize happens, is that when you're editing these anthologies, people start contacting you, and people started messaging me on Facebook and New York Times bestsellers, and I'm like, why are you to me? So I get a lot of that. So
did you try to accommodate as many as you could, or how did you handle that?
Some of them got in, and some of them became good friends too, but we couldn't get everybody in. And the same thing happens, we'll talk about later with Kolchak, but with a lot of this, people come to me and say, "Oh, I want to be in this," and I want to. After Classic Monsters, then things. Yes and no. At Shakespeare, actually, it was easier because people now knew me and wanted to be a book. But I actually got more no's with Shakespeare Unleashed than Classic Monsters, because people either were, I think, intimidated by the Shakespeare.
Yeah. I think Shakespeare's a little intimidating, sure.
Because I think they felt like, oh, the language would have to be like Shakespeare, which it didn't have to be. Or they weren't as familiar with Shakespeare. Or some people said, I'm not into Shakespeare. So I think Classic Monsters is pretty universal for horror fans. Shakespeare wasn't as much. So it was more, people feeling like they couldn't maybe do it justice.
It widened out what you can do.
Yeah, I also wanted to add in there, and I'm digitally beating my brain here, because there was a Shakespeare graphic novel series done by two great guys out of Canada, where they took because you said you didn't know that you could do this with Shakespeare characters, and they took the Shakespeare characters, and it was like Shakespeare was someone these characters had heard about, who was influencing their existence, and so they go looking for him. And
Okay.
it was almost like looking for the wizard in the Wizard of Oz kind of thing. And I can't remember the name of it, but that sort of rang some bells for a while there. But it's funny because a lot of people can, like you said, Tom Stoppard and all, can take the old classic material and breathe some sort of fresh angle into it that allows a whole new audience to find it.
Which brings us to your first brush with Kolchak. And what an experience that must have been. So it was a collection, a graphic, it was like a comic or graphic novel collection of short stories. 50th anniversary, another gorgeous just collection, just the book, everything is beautiful. But that proved not only on Kickstarter, where I forget how much you asked, but you wound up with 110K. But it also showed that it had wheels when it came to award season. So let's talk about your Kolchak at 50th anniversary experience. Because you didn't have the license at that time, how did this come about?
And who is Kolchak?
It's the Night Stalker.
Kolchak was a reporter, and this was started as a TV show, although the book came first, it was published after. He's basically a reporter who just happens to stumble upon a lot of monsters. At the time, every week, a call would be just trying to do a story, and then a vampire would show up. At least he thought it was a vampire, and he always proven to be right. But it was the inspiration for shows like X-Files. X-Files was
sure.
big inspiration.
Supernatural.
Shows like Supernatural, Vampire Slayer, I think you can definitely connect to Kolchak. Because Kolchak, actually the first, that was 1972, was the first TV movie. And there was nothing on TV like Kolchak, that a cult detective.
Still isn't.
Yeah, it set records for the biggest viewership.
Yeah, it was the biggest TV movie of all time.
It was it was the first one was Kolchak, the Night Stalker, which was a vampire tale.
Right.
And then I don't know how much time passed before they did a second one, which was Night Strangler, which was the same formula, different creature, if you will.
Yeah.
And then they went to the TV series.
Yes. And
so every year. So 72, January of 72, they do the Night Stalker. January of the next year, 73, they did the Night Strangler. And then 1974 is the TV series, but which lasted only
one season. Yeah. And you can see why Darren McGavin fought valiantly to keep the quality of that show going. But as the second half of the season went, you could see they were spending less and less money. Frustrating because even for what it was, it's still viewed by fans with a lot of love. And I think that's part.
Yeah.
That's part of what happened with your Kickstarter experience. Again, another shock at how successful it was.
Yeah, I didn't think
so.
It would make much money.
So how did you get?
No, I'm sorry. What were you going to say? What were you saying, James?
I'm saying we needed a lot of money though, because those graphic novels are really expensive. So if it didn't make that much money, I would have been in a lot of trouble.
Right. So how did you get the license or permission to do a Kolchak anniversary?
So after the success of this, I did that right after Classic Monsters Unleashed. So once Classic Monsters Unleashed was successful, I was like, I want to do a comic book because that's what I really want to do. So I was like, no, now it's a big chance to do a comic book project. And Kickstarter is great for doing comic books too. It might be better for comics than for prose books, especially anthologies. So I was looking around for something to do, and I just happened to stumble. I knew Moonstone did Kolchak. And then as I'm Googling Kolchak, I was like, holy cow, the 50th anniversary is next year. So this was like maybe June of 21. And I'm like, the 50th anniversary of the first TV movie is that January. This is perfect timing. So I said, if we can do like a 50th anniversary Kolchak thing, this would be perfect. And it was perfect timing because if I could get started right now, we can do the Kickstarter right when the anniversary is. I just pitched Moonstone, and Moonstone said yes. And so we just started working on it from there. but I was in charge of the whole thing, and I had to fund everything. It was on me. If we didn't raise the money, I would be responsible for all that. Graphic novel, it was supposed to be 100 pages. It grew to almost 200 pages, and every page is several $100s. Thankfully, we were successful because it is expensive. Even a 100-page graphic novel would probably cost, just for the art, 25,000, maybe $30,000, and then printing is probably at least another 10 grand or something like that. The hardcovers,
Color or black and white?
It was color.
It was color.
Yeah, so full color is even more expensive.
We were doing color, we were doing hardcover. The deluxe hardcover was 250 pages, and we had big name people in that one too. I mean, we had like top-notch artists from like DC and Marvel, so they were getting good rates. So yeah, I mean, it definitely needed to do. If I only made like 15 grand, I don't know what I would have done. I would have
But you made 110, and
that
that allowed you to produce absolutely gorgeous and great salute to this beloved character. And I assume you thought that was the goal, and then it kept rolling. Can you talk about the Stoker Awards, the Rondo Hatton Awards, and the Imogene? What happened? How did this?
I don't know. I was, like I said, when I did my first Kickstarter for Dead Jack, I was really worried that we wouldn't raise $1,000, and I was like saying, I might have to find somebody to put the money in just so I'm not embarrassed. So I definitely wasn't expecting to also get awards. That was like the last thing. I'm just very
These are like key awards, James.
Yeah, I know. All of the awards happened within, I think, 6 months. Not 6 months, 6 weeks of each other last year.
Right.
Yeah, the Stoker got nominated for that. Then 2 Rondo Hatton Awards got nominated for that. There's also the Scribe Award, which was given out by the International Media Tie-In Writers. And so I was like, this is crazy. It was like I was nominated for, I think, and Classic Monstress was also.
It had been nominated, yeah.
Rondo Hatton Award and the Imagine Award. So I'm like, what's going on? This is crazy. And then I was winning most of it. I think out of the 6 awards, I think I won 5. So every couple of weeks, I'm winning an award. So I didn't expect that. That was weird because I've never gotten any type of recognition. I've never won anything ever. And
I say that now.
Oh, I got a whole shelf now of awards. So it's really insane.
Obviously, most of the credit goes to you for being the person who commandeered the ship and sailed the ship and all that. Yeah. Would you say, is there any attribution to give to the character of Kolchak?
Oh, absolutely. Kolchak, I don't take any real credit for the success of Kolchak, and that's on Kolchak. And there's a huge Kolchak fandom, which I wasn't aware of before I did the graphic novel. I thought, yeah, people like Kolchak, but I wasn't aware that there was this huge fandom behind Kolchak.
I would imagine you started to get a hint of it when all the people who have participated turned in such passionate work.
Yeah.
Story after story is just really great.
Yeah.
And it's because it was a chance to write this character. We'll come back to that in a moment.
Yeah, they're definitely like waiting for this opportunity.
So we will get back to Kolchak and to Kickstarter, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are waiting. And while you're waiting, hit the link and subscribe because there's more coming.
Smooth.
There you go. I want to take a little side journey to talk about the Dead Detective Society. Now, that was, of course, one of them would be Dead Jack, your character. But again, there's a community of dead detectives that was made for a really interesting book. So can you talk about the origins of that, please?
When I had come up with the idea for Dead Jack many years ago, maybe going back to, I don't know, like 2008 or 9. And it was like one of the first short stories I ever finished. So, and I didn't do anything with it because I didn't think anybody would be interested in this. I wasn't really familiar with the short story venues or anything. So I didn't know what people were putting out, but that didn't seem like something that would be published. So I just forgot about it. Then around 2011, when I wanted to start taking my writing career seriously, and I wanted to finally get published, I took a writing class online, and you had to write 2 stories, and I wrote one story, and people were very confused by it. I was trying to do like this magical realism thing, and it didn't work out, and it was just a disaster. I was writing a story for the second one, and I couldn't finish it, and the deadline was coming up, and I had to upload something. So I just uploaded this Dead Jack story just to put some up. And the people in the class and the teacher loved it. They were like, this is great. This should be a series. And I was like, oh, people do this thing? So I was like, oh, okay, maybe this does have somewhere to go. So then when Weird Tales was looking for zombie stories, I submitted it and they accepted it. So it was like off and running from there. And then the short stories came, and then the novel and all that. But I forgot what your question was. But coming back to it, when I first came up with the idea, I thought it was super original. I thought, wow, a zombie detective. No one had ever thought of that. Because I love detective stories, and I wanted to come up with something original. I was like, what's the craziest idea for a type of detective? So I said, zombie would be great. So I thought it was a totally original story. So when I was about to try to get it published somewhere, I said, let me Google this and see maybe someone else came up with, and I don't want to like look like I ripped anybody off. And so when I Googled zombie detective, 2 things came up, and that was Tim Wagner with his Necropolis stories, Matt Richter, who's a zombie detective, and Kevin J. Anderson, who has his Dan Shamble story. So I guess I wasn't as original as I thought. So actually I had to change a few things because my world was originally called Necropolis, like Tim Wagner's. So I changed it to Pandemonium. So thankfully I did Google it. And then fast forward a few years, and then I'm working with Tim Wagner, right? So Tim's been in like all of my books and stuff. And I knew Kevin as well. So I said, it would be funny now if I put Dead Jack in a book with that Dan and Matt Richter. And through the years, people will bring up the comparisons or even accuse me of ripping off Dan Shamble or Matt Richter or something. So I said, it'd be cool to put them all in one book together. Kevin J. Anderson, too, was involved a little bit with the Kolchak book, too. He gave me a blurb. He actually he did a Dan Shamble Kolchak graphic novel a few years ago. So that we had included that in one of the campaigns. So that's how Dead Detective Society came, because I love this idea of dead detectives or zombie detectives. And then I learned that there is like a little subgenre of that. So I thought it'd be very cool to put it together in one book.
But it's also if you're a fan of one of those characters, or if you really like that idea, you pick this up and you get turned on to 4 or 5, 6 different characters that you may not have heard of. And now your reading library is full. You go and get those guys. So that's really cool. Through all this, a company emerges, Monstrous Books, and that's your company. And first of all, in general, let's talk a little bit about it. Tell us about Monstrous Books.
I've been doing the first few Kickstarters I was doing with other publishers. Classic Monsters Unleashed we did with Crystal Lake. Kolchak I did with Moonstone. Even Shakespeare Unleashed was Crystal Lake was a little bit involved. I'm raising all the money. I'm also doing all the work, putting the books together. So I am the publisher. So it didn't make sense to continue working with the publishers. I still work with Crystal Lake, and I think it's really great to work with. But if you raise the money, then you are the publisher, and you might as well have the control that comes with your own company. So I decided, let me just start my own company, and then I can do the stuff under my own imprint, because I'm already there. It didn't really make sense at that point when you're doing the books with another publisher. So that's when I ended up starting Monstress about 2 years ago.
And you have a publication called Monstress.
Yeah, I always wanted to do a magazine, and that's a cool name, Monstress. We started doing a digest magazine, a throwback to, because Weird Tales and a lot of those old pulps were digest sized.
Right.
But that's a little bit smaller. It's 5.5 by 7.5. It should be like you can put it in like your back pocket. Weird Tales now is a big
it's magazine format.
I wanted to be more of a throwback of the old classic pulp magazines, the digest size, and have a mix of comics. Half of it's about 40 pages. The next issue will probably be way over 40 pages, but about half is comics. The other half we have short stories and articles and things like that. Just a throwback to the old pulps. And it's the idea of doing the comics where I can do a different thing every issue. And the idea originally was to, when I do a Kickstarter, to try to fund another issue of Monstress. But that is not the main reward. So if I do, when I was doing the Detective Society, I said, let me throw this in as an add-on, and then I can try to fund another issue. And that way I can, every time I do a Kickstarter, I'll just fund another issue of the magazine. And that'd be a cool way of getting it off the ground.
Cool. Fantastic. Now,
I have
go
a-
ahead.
Yeah. You have literally built up this empire.
Empire.
Starting out as Castle Monstrous, starting out as an assistant or an editor in some way, shape, or form to, I'm editing, I'm doing this, but I'm writing. And at some point, you must have started to develop, in music, they would call it an ear, but in this case, you must have developed a style and a feel for the kind of stories that work, the kind of stories you wanted to write, the kind of stories that would resonate in an anthology, in a collection. And I'm just wondering, what do you look for when you're putting together these stories, when you're reaching out to these writers? What are you looking for? What rings the bell for you?
For me, it's more, I go back to the old pulps, and I want it to be exciting and fun and entertaining more than anything. So not that I'm not a fan of it, but I'm not as much of looking for the literary type story. So I'm looking for like the fun and exciting, maybe pulpy, more plot. Often when I read stuff from Slush, it's the stories are boring. They're not that they're badly written. They usually are well-written stories, but they usually just don't grab your attention. And I love when I get a story from the Slush and it at least keeps my interest. If you keep my interest from beginning to end, then you have a pretty good shot of getting an acceptance. But that's, just try to be interesting and different and not dull. So I hate stories that start off dull. I talk short stories. I love a really good opening line. So I hate when someone gives me a really dull, he sat down in his chair and he sighed. You know how many times I've seen that opening? Somebody, or how many times somebody wakes up with a start? That's half of the stories. He woke up with a start. Or someone's just running in the woods and they don't know who they are, or they don't know whether they are. So that is also the cliche thing. But give me a really interesting opening line, and then you're probably halfway there, I think.
There you go.
And then, as you said, pacing, entertaining, interesting.
Make it interesting, make it fun, make it different. But you can see from what I do, it's pulpy and retro. I love the older stuff. We're doing Kolchak from the 70s, and the Detective Society also has a very pulpy kind of retro feel. Classic Monsters, Shakespeare, and anything going way back. I had that classic feel of something that could still be read 20, 30 years from now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
One of the most recent and a very exciting development for Monstrous Books is you have acquired the license to produce Kolchak. And the first thing you're doing is restoring the original Jeff Rice novel that, no matter the chronology, it started it all. Tell us, if you can, the origins of you acquiring Kolchak from Moonstone, and then why restoration of this is your first step.
Well, the license is with the Jeff Rice estate. Jeff Rice, he had always had the literary rights to Kolchak.
Great.
Because it began as an unpublished novel. So when I was working with the 50th anniversary, I was in contact with the estate, and even with the graphic novel, I had licensed that directly from the estate, and not Moonstone. Not to talk bad about Moonstone, but we didn't really. Moonstone didn't have as much to do with it as people would think, because I ended up licensing it from Jeff
the estate,
and then I put the book together, and then we put Moonstone's logo on it. And Moonstone's not happy with me right now, now that we've got the license, but the license expired earlier this year.
Okay.
And the Rice estate was very happy with the success of the graphic novel. And so they were very willing to have me come in and take the license and then do the Kolchak books.
Fantastic.
on.
And but why the
And
restoration?
yeah, that's a great
Well,
story. Go ahead.
the last time it was reprinted, there was and a lot of people who are familiar with the Kolchak books, especially that book, know that it's filled with a lot of typos. There was a lot of typos. There was a lot of stuff was taken out, and I don't know why. I think some things were changed too, but there was stuff deleted from the original manuscript. There was a lot of typos in there, even in the original, because we were going over it in the original. It was one of those paperback only.
Had an orangey brown cover.
Yeah, so even that had some typos in there too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought it would be nice to finally have a really nice edition because there was
Yeah.
never like a hardcover edition.
Mm-hmm.
To do a really nice edition that was hardcover, it had illustrations in it, and then we can fix all the typos and restore the original text. And our friend Jim Chambers,
There it is. Friend of the
did
show, James
uh,
Chambers.
because he knows Kolchak, and I didn't want that job.
Jim and Jim, folks.
Yeah,
Okay.
God bless him.
So I said, "Can you go through the manuscript?" And then he went and bought the original book,
Right.
and then compared it to the manuscript that we had. And then he really was in charge of restoring it and making sure that it adhered to the original text.
Great.
And that's
He was really good. He
very
was really
exciting.
thorough about it and found even a lot of mistakes that were in the original. There were some misspellings of city names and things like
Yeah.
that, and just some errors and things like that. So he did like a lot of research on it and did a really fantastic job.
So for both Kolchak fans and for those who say, I really want to see where this all began, this promises to be the ultimate version of the original Kolchak story, The Night Stalker. And that's really fantastic to look forward to. I know you're doing a Kickstarter about it now. I'd like to get to that next, but if you don't mind, James, I have to apologize to you. Because when you agreed to come on the show, I mentioned it. Maybe it was a mistake. I don't know. But I mentioned I'm going to talk to James about Kolchak, and I got these fanboy questions. So I narrowed it down to 5. Okay. And it's
And you
all
can
about,
do rapid
future
fire,
plans.
too. You can do rapid
Yeah.
fire answers.
Future plans.
And we'll give you
And
time.
you can say, I'm taking the 5th, or definitely no. If there's a yes and you want to expand upon it, this would be exciting for all involved. So you ready for this? Okay, so we have the original novel coming, and that's what the Kickstarter is about. As soon as I mentioned that, they said, how about the second novel? Do you have any plans to do the second novel, which was an adaptation of Matheson's screenplay for The Night Strangler?
I would like to do a similar thing with that, but like as you said, I think rights wise, we really have to figure that out because the second TV movie was written by Richard Matheson, and then Jeff Rice wrote I guess an
How to
album.
reverse the order
Yeah,
of The Night Stalker
so
with The Night
if we
Strangler.
figure that out, the rights, then definitely I would do a reprint of that too.
Okay, so then the next one was, is he going to print the screenplays? There's the screenplays, the TV scripts.
But that's a whole other so yeah, because then see the dramatic rights I think are owned by Disney at this point because originally it aired on ABC, but the studio that was behind it was Universal, which is
so it's another
it's also
labyrinthian journey to even consider.
Yeah, that's why you'll see the TV series pops up on Peacock,
right,
or on the I think it was on the NBC.com app.
And it was on MeTV for a little while.
It's on, it's still on MeTV.
Yeah.
So the rights, as far as the TV series goes, definitely we don't have the rights to that.
All right.
Although that would be a cool thing to do.
That would be a lot of fun. There's one other old question like that, and then we're going to get to 2 new questions. There was a thing called the Kolchak Companion. And it's long out of print, and it's really hard to find. Is there any talk, any interest, any thought of trying to bring that back into publication?
It's supposed to be getting reprinted, actually.
By you?
Not by me.
Too bad.
Mark Dawidziak, who wrote the companion. He has a piece he's going to write a profile on Jeff Rice for my reprint. I actually did ask Mark about that. I said I'd be willing to reprint it, but he said there already were plans to have it. I think it was supposed to be originally reprinted last year, but I think they moved to this year. So hopefully they can get that out, because it's a really great book.
Yeah.
And it is hard to get. And I see it go on sale on eBay for $500. And
Yep. That's crazy.
You can't get a copy of it. It's really hard.
No, but it would be a wonderful reprint. All right, 2 future questions. This was someone who really loved the 50th anniversary. Do you have any plans to do new comic adventures?
Yeah, that's the next Kickstarter project. Probably this fall will be a big comic book project.
Breaking news, Alex.
Yep.
And you heard it here first.
Leading up to him talking about Kickstarters. Go ahead with the last question.
We'll look forward to that. And then any plans for new prose, short stories, or novels featuring Kolchak?
Yeah, I want to do everything with Kolchak. I want to do
so great. That's so great.
So I would like to do an anthology of prose stories maybe next year. Actually, with this, I just added to this campaign a standalone book that are reprinting the 50th anniversary prose stories. It was in the deluxe edition along with the comics.
There was an ebook.
Prose stories. But the original idea was always to do them as a separate book, but Moonstone didn't want to do it as a separate book, so I had to put it into the graphic novel. So now I'm breaking them out, and then we're going to reprint most of them into an ebook that's available for this campaign. And I'm going to have two new stories in there too we weren't able to fit into the original graphic novel.
We'll look forward to that, and it's a great segue to, for those of you who've stayed around to hear this.
Thank you for waiting, folks. And of course, go wait, because you shared a ton of great information. We're really thankful for you for doing that. Really, you've been very open and supportive.
And to lead in, people can. When does the Kolchak original novel Kickstarter end?
It's going to end tomorrow night, or I don't know when it's going to air, but Thursday night, July 11th.
Right. We'll probably miss that deadline.
Okay.
But
there'll be late pledges, but there's a very good chance that we're going to sell out of the hardcover.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh gee, that's a shame.
It's a happy problem to have.
Yeah.
Now
I'm not feeling too bad for you here.
We had said that your Kickstarter experience with Dead Jack was a pleasant surprise, that your 50th anniversary Kolchak comic anthology, another shock, and went to about 110 grand. As I remember, the original goal for the Kolchak Night Stalker novel restoration was $1,973, 1973. The date stuck out really well. I thought that was clever. You met that goal and surpassed it, if I remember correctly. How is the Kickstarter doing right now?
It's doing very well, actually. We're gonna probably hit 100K again with this one. I don't know if it'll surpass the first one, but only probably because we're gonna sell out of the books. We probably will surpass the first one. And also, this is like a week shorter than the original. So we also limited the books to 1973.
73. There you go.
So right now, I think there's only maybe 150 left.
Get on that. Yeah.
What's the magic?
You're so successful, and there's so many things you do. How? Talk about the components in general, and then we'll go a little further in. What do you think it takes to have a successful Kickstarter project?
Having Kolchak does help.
Everybody get Kolchak. But I would argue that Dead Jack wasn't, right? And that succeeded. So
he wasn't known and you weren't known.
So there must be some common denominators. The James Aquilone flavor What is what's the
What's
secret
the secret
sauce,
sauce?
James?
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
yes.
25 spices and herbs.
I do take jobs as a Kickstarter consultant and manager. Yeah, actually, yeah, I started doing that last year. So I've worked on a bunch of projects too for other people. It sounds crazy, but if you add up all of the money I raised in my personal campaigns and the ones I've worked for my clients, we've hit $1 million at this point.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I helped because I worked on a campaign with Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones
Mm-hmm.
last year. It's really cool. They're doing a series of Dracula graphic novels, which are really cool. Yeah, a lot of it too is that I am involved in really cool projects, and that made $265,000.
Right.
So I can't take credit for that, but that helps. I think first and foremost is have, and then we're talking about books, to have just a book that gets people excited. If you have a book that gets people excited from the get-go, um, you don't really have to sell it. So when I did Classic Monsters Unleashed, as soon as I told people, even when I was trying to get contributors, as soon as I told them the idea, which was very simple, it was like, hey, let's do new stories of Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman. People were already in. So difficult to sell that. So right there, that's half the battle, is to have a good idea. And on Kickstarter, it really helps to have a high concept idea. If you do want to try to sell like your literary standalone novel on Kickstarter, that's going to be really hard. But if you can have this high concept type of book, like a zombie detective, like classic monsters, that helps. So you really need something that's really marketable and that it lends itself to a campaign like this to get people excited and that has a fandom connected to it. That's the other thing. It's a lot of it is marketing, because if you have a cross-genre book or something and then you don't know where the audience is and then you don't know who to sell it to, it's really hard. Shakespeare was a little bit harder than Classic Monsters because Classic Monsters Unleashed, it has that audience. It has those classic monster fans, and they were very easy to find. So you can go on Facebook.
I so want to say that Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman have better name recognition than Shakespeare, but
Does, especially around horror fans. So
sure, definitely. Yeah.
I can just go to the Facebook groups and then sell the books pretty easily. And even with ads, it's very easy to target them. With Shakespeare, I'm talking about like having that high concept idea. Some people, after they heard, they were confused. They were like, Shakespeare and horror, and then so it was a little bit harder to sell that.
Yeah.
Even though it did well, but didn't do as well as Classic Monsters. But we made 40,000, which is pretty good, and
Yeah.
it was for an anthology. But I could see there was a difference where Classic Monsters Unleashed was like such an easy sell, and people were really behind it, and people understood the idea. And then with Shakespeare was just just that little bit of a difference where the concept I don't think was just so as easily as understood. People were like, I don't understand. What do you mean Shakespeare and it's going to be horror stories? Even just that little difference can maybe trip you up and not be as successful, even though it did do well. But stuff like that.
In campaign, you tend to really have a clear idea of levels and incentives and stuff to offer. How did that develop for you? And what advice would you be able to give people as far as coming up with incentives to
Get people to reach
invest a
into their
little
pockets.
more? Yeah, to go to the next level. So
like we were saying before about it taking 9 years to go and do the anthology, and then I didn't pull the trigger until I was ready. The same thing I did with the Kickstarters. I was watching Kickstarters and studying them since probably like 2011. So even before I did the first Dead Jack campaign, I was very involved with the Kickstarters and helped other people and worked. So it's like studying Kickstarters and seeing what works, but also in between the Dead Jack campaign and doing the Classic Monsters, I was involved in another campaign that I didn't run. It was a company that wanted to do a tabletop role-playing game that was based on Dead Jack, and they ran the campaign. And I gave them a marketing plan. I said, let's do it. I felt like I learned a lot from the Dead Jack campaign, and I'm a big fan of Kickstarter. And I had ideas. So they ignored my marketing plan completely. They did what they wanted to do, and they did everything wrong. They did everything you can possibly do wrong. And it was really from that campaign. I learned more from that campaign than any of the successful campaigns that
Can
I
you
did.
give us, say, two things? Don't do this.
One of the I think the biggest thing that they did wrong was they didn't do the landing page. So what Kickstarter gives you is that you can launch a landing page before you launch, right? It's just the title and an image and a subheading. And then from that, you do your pre-launch promotion, and then you just try to get people to sign up for the email alert. So that's your only job before you're going to launch your campaign. Get people to that page and get them to sign up for that email, because as soon as you launch, that email goes out to all the people who signed up, and then people pledge, hopefully. But there's always a certain percentage, about 20% of the people that sign up for that email will end up pledging. So you want to drive up that number of people who sign up for that as high as you possibly get, because your first day is going to be your biggest day by far, and then it's going to drop off rapidly, and then go down to nothing, and then those middle weeks it's dead, your campaign. So you want to build up as much as you can for that first day, and the best way to do that is to get people to sign up for that email alert. They didn't do that. They didn't set up the pre-launch page for whatever reason, which was a huge mistake. And they just wanted they didn't want to give anyone any information about the campaign.
Oh, jeez.
They wanted to like make it a secret.
Oh yeah, great,
Like,
right. Yeah.
like Taylor Swift like drops a secret album, but it's like, you're Taylor Swift. Like, no one knows this is coming.
Right. Different
So they were
story.
just saying like, is this a secret project that's coming out? So they didn't want to do the landing page. So basically you're starting from zero on as soon as you launch. So you launch, and now you hope people start showing up. But that was a huge mistake. So they didn't do that.
So landing page.
The landing page is probably one of the most important thing.
Tell everybody everywhere. Don't keep it a secret.
Don't keep it a secret. Try to, save some stuff for the campaign, but that's what I usually do. I start the campaign. Don't say a word about this campaign or show any art or anything like that. Don't reveal anything until you get that landing page up. And you get the landing, then over the next few weeks, have a plan, and then start revealing the contributors, start showing some pieces of art, and then like end with the cover. So you want to build excitement, as you go along, and they get people into a frenzy, and then they start giving you their money.
Give you the donations.
I'm clock watching. I want to just go back because again, you're right. Obviously, having a named entity, product, even people involved who have a following or fan base helps any campaign for sure, especially if it's done right and not kept a secret. But going back to, and this is again for the benefit of those folks that are listening who are not any of the things I just named, when you did your Dead Detective campaign, you stated yourself you were unknown and the character was unknown. What do you think you did that helped that come alive for you? No pun intended.
Yep. That's right. That was a little more difficult. And I know a lot of people then who are starting out, that's the big problem that they're going to face, is that how do I do this? How do I do the first one? One, it was a novel that I know I'm writing, so it wasn't going to cost me that much money. So one, I didn't have to raise that much money. So if you're going to have a really high goal, that especially for your first campaign, that's going to be hard. So $1,000 was very doable, and making $5,000, that was a huge success at the time. So one, go with a low goal. Don't worry about it. I had the high concept marketable idea with the zombie detective, and people were very excited about that. And it helps then also to have art, and really cool art. If you have really cool art and you can show that, that's also one of the really important things, because a lot of anthologies nowadays don't have art, and most books don't have art unless it's a comic book, but most prose books don't have artwork. But it really helps with a Kickstarter. So if you have something to show and you have the cool art and you have a cool concept, that's going to help. But also you're going to have to really try to work social media as much as you can, and just find ways of building up your social media following before you launch a campaign.
Is that like the landing page scenario, or is that pre-landing page scenario?
Before that, just in general, try to build up your social media following, your Twitter and your Facebook, start a group. I had pages too. So I had pages. Again, I was preparing everything I did. I was preparing for years before I did the Kickstarter. So before I did that Jack Kickstarter, I was preparing for years, either studying Kickstarter, but also building up my pages on Facebook. So I had pages where I would just put up memes and things, but I was building up a nice following. I had some pages that had tens of thousands of followers, and so you need
build
to
up your audience
build up your audience as much as you can. Newsletter, Facebook pages, and then try to network too and get those people to share the project. It also happened that back then in 2016, the algorithm on Facebook was also much more in our favor than it is now. When I shared stuff and I was able to share links then, and it wouldn't get murdered on Facebook. But if you share a link, you can't do that anymore. You can't share a link. If you share a link, your reach is going to be cut by like more than 90%. So if you notice, if you ever put up an article on Facebook, you probably aren't going to get that many likes. You have to put
it's much more difficult now. We're waiting for the next guru to say, you know what? I'm going to keep the reach and then let everybody talk to everybody.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
And then and the GIFs, you that would just start that you put up a GIF and people were just fascinated by it. So I did like an animated cover for Dead Jack, and I did as a GIF. And people were blown away. And now, of course, you have all that stuff. So you have to really work social media and see what are new things that you can do. And you have to play the game. You have to figure out the social media game and how to have it work in your favor.
And to bring that back, I'm going to bring that back to the Kickstarter, specifically for the restoration of the Jeff Rice Kolchak, the Night Stalker, which is ongoing, which going towards the end of it right now. One of the things that you've done on social media to bring people back to the Kickstarter is you premiered the button and then the card art and other incentives that always bring down. You had those, I would imagine, from what you've been saying in this conversation, that you've had those planned and then you just dropped them along the way. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's another one of those Kickstarter tricks you can do. You can try to do an incentive if you sign up. If you pledge in the first 48 hours or 24 hours, you get a free print, you get a free button or something. Actually, this is the first time I've done that. You can do like an early bird special too, where you can reduce the price of the rewards for the first 24 hours or the first 48 hours or however long you want. Like I said, the most important thing is that opening day. So you need a really big opening day. If your opening day doesn't do well, it's really hard to save the campaign. If your goal was like $50,000 and on day one you only made like $5,000, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
But it's only going to get much worse. If you made $10,000 on day one, you'll be very lucky to make $4,000 on day two.
Right.
You're not even going to make half. And then on day three, you'll probably make half of what you made on day two. And then it goes down. So you really need to front load on day one. So that's why it's good to have incentives to get people to back on the first day.
All right, Alex?
Actually, I was just going to ask him, certainly you're going to give us a link that we can put into the content and into the comment section. Thank you very much. Right. I was trying to find the Kickstarter campaign for Kolchak. And where is that? Because I thought it would be nice to throw it here on the screen. But I'm not seeing it.
Oh, you can go to monstressbooks.com and my website, and there's links to that.
That's probably easier to do. So you can go to Monstrous Books. Yes.
And while he's throwing that up on the screen, James, is there a best practice that we haven't talked about with Kickstarter? I've always heard you have to be on top of it all the time.
You do. I think some people do just set it and forget it. They set it up and they just let it
go. That's a mistake. Yeah.
I am. I'm more of a micromanager, and I'm watching it all the time.
There you go. All right, so here we are. What do we got here?
There we go. Kolchak the Night Stalker cover revealed for deluxe hardcover edition, the original novel. That even looks a little bit like the actor who played the vampire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well done.
Good
Wow.
movie, scary. So if you just hit that link where it says Kickstarter, that'll take you to the.
Oh, okay, fine. And this is our Dead Detectives?
That's the
Yep.
Dead Detective Society.
Yeah, folks, you got to go check out their website.
MonstrousBooks.com. Yep.
There you go. Look at that. Oh, geez. Sorry. There we go. The novel that started it all. That's great. That's great. And then you've got, I'm sorry, go
you
ahead.
have 1,923 backers. We're just shy of 1973. Come on, everybody. Let's get that many backers.
50 more people. Yeah. Okay.
31 hours. Okay.
And how much time do we have? Hours to go?
31 hours. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to bring it out early. We don't know. But you have those essays are in there. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's worth getting the deluxe edition, man. Woo.
But this will be
I have to go up
hours.
I have to up my commitment there. Get that.
I'm gonna stop sharing. You said this is gonna be over in a few hours.
Yeah, so that looks like 30 minutes.
So by the time this airs, folks, too bad.
Yeah, yeah.
But go to Monstrous Books and keep an eye out on further developments. There's plenty of stuff to delight your imagination there.
Yep.
James, you have been fascinating to watch these last few years, and it was great. It was a great conversation. I hope you'll come back when things are published, when Kolchak's out there, and we can talk about, maybe we can help advertise the next Kickstarter, Kolchak Kickstarter, and get you going. That would be cool.
Oh, that
Also,
sounds great.
yeah, I'm sorry, John. What did you say, James?
No, that sounds great.
Okay. The other thing is Chris and I are always talking, because we don't shut up, but we're always talking about, some roundtable discussions and fun discussions about different genres and things. So we'd love to have you back when we're talking also, about horror and suspense and hope and all that. So, and have a few more folks here and just really get down, as a phrase.
It would be fun to have maybe you and James Chambers and maybe Teal, maybe get a few of the other writers that you might suggest and just talk Kolchak for an episode. I think our ratings would go way up, and it would be a lot of pre-publication promo for you would be a win for everybody. But maybe we'll do that if you're interested.
No, absolutely. I love talking about Kolchak.
Cool.
Again, congratulations really on everything from start to finish. Really, it's a great example of persistence and imagination and consistency.
And commitment. That's a thing that I keep noticing. Yep. Excellent job. James, thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, go to Monstrous Books. Check out all of the wonders that James offers.
And before you do that, what else should they do, Chris?
They want to wait till the very end and then hit that subscribe and that, so that we know that you love James as much as we do. There you go.
And James, you will be back. Everybody, thank you, Chris. Always a joy.
Peace, everybody.
See you guys again.
There you go. Thanks, James.
Everybody.
Thank you.
All right.